our venture through the book of Joshua. Man, this has been breaking me. I don't know if you're reading Joshua with us, but in addition to your regular everyday reading, to read the Bible through in a year, you might jump on Joshua again. It is so good. What a story. You know, it is, in many ways, obviously it physically happened, it's true, and you can read it as history, but it's a type of your life and my life once we cross over the Red Sea, right, that which they did with Moses into their salvation, the people of Israel. They are in a wilderness for 40 years, wandering. And the whole time they're in this wilderness, right, God is still with them. He's still their provision. He's still providing for them. But they're not really facing, nor are they prepared to face, any real dark, deep, devious, mean enemies. Right? It's a little bit of a honeymoon phase after they've been delivered from bondage in Egypt. But they're not delivered except from physical bondage. Because the first time Moses goes up the mountain to get the 10 Commandments, God wrote on tablets of stone with the fingers of his hand, or the finger of his hand. They build a golden calf. You know that story. And they're worshiping that calf when Moses comes back down. And I don't know, it's kind of like the old Arsenio Hall show, right? What were they thinking? That's not his byline, but whatever it was. It makes you go, yeah. What's going on here except I see myself in that picture? And honest people all do. Paul did when he wrote Romans chapter 7. He talked about that. He said, what's the matter with me? Oh, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death? Because I want to do what's right in my spirit. I want to be a godly man. I want to lift up a godly standard. I want everyone in the community to think well of me and to be respected by the people of faith. But in my members, I do something different than what I want to do. What's wrong with me? I was looking at Joshua these last couple of weeks with Michael and Eric. They did such an amazing job. But I'm reminded the reason we get to Joshua is because there was something eventually so defective with Moses, though he was God's man for the hour, right, that kept him from entering the promised land, at least on this trip. He shows up later on the Mount of Transfiguration, glorified with the Lord Jesus himself. So he did make it in spiritually to the promised hope, land, and treasure of God, but he didn't make it in physically. And that's why Joshua had to become the next leader that led the people into the promised land. It reminds me, by the way, that even though somebody can be a great man of God, a great woman of God, somebody that God uses, somebody God's hand is on, that I can so strategically blow it that God's very best plan for my life I miss. I can still amount to something for God. In fact, God told Moses, we're going to take, by the way, this is just like Aaron died and was taken to a mountain and his remains were there. You're going to do the same thing. These people are going to weep over you for 30 days. They're going to remember you. You're going to be a great hero. There's never been anyone like you in their lives so far in the kingdom. But you can't go into the promised land. Look at the end of Deuteronomy in chapter 34 when it talks about the death of Moses. It even says, now Joshua, in verse 9, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid hands on him. Moses was still integral even in the life of his successor, even though his successor blew it. Because Moses had laid hands on him. So the Israelites listened to him and did what the Lord had commanded Moses. Since then, no prophet has arisen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those miraculous signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his officials and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all. sight of all Israel, but he doesn't get to go into the promised land. What? You can't go into the promised land. What's wrong with me? I was looking at Joshua these last couple of weeks with Michael and Eric. They did such an amazing job. But I'm reminded the reason we get to Joshua is because there was something eventually so defective with Moses, though he was God's man for the hour, right, that kept him from entering the promised land. And that's why Joshua had to become the next leader that led the people into the promised land. Thank God, spiritually, we entered into the salvation of God, and every Israelite did. The physical picture of that was going into the Red Sea. And by the way, you can do nothing to affect that change. You're not going to pile up water on both sides and walk through on dry land, absent the power and mighty miraculous provision of God. You can't do a thing to affect your own salvation. By the way, when you beg Him and plead with Him, He'll even change your provision from time to time. They got tired of manna bread, manna burgers, manna souffles, manna dogs, and He gave them quail to go with it. Right? So you can affect that when you beseech and implore and ask God. But you can't affect your own salvation. But here's what you can affect. The entire first part, the majority writing in the book of Joshua is about how they possess that land. Listen, spiritually speaking, there is a great, great story here for us. There's a great lesson that we need to learn. And that's this. Think about it. Before they could physically possess the land of God, they had to physically, strategically, militarily dispossess the enemies in that land. A lot of times we ask God to do that, right? Say, oh God, if you just take this desire away, I'd stop doing it. Lord, if you'll just touch me. God, I just ask you today that I not want to smoke another cigarette, or that I not want to take another toke of that marijuana. Or God, just today, make it where women, they just look ugly to me. All women, Lord. It's not just the ugly ones. He's not saying He's going to take it away. He's saying He's going to send you in and be with you while you dispossess the enemies that are possessing the land He's giving you. Man, what a lesson we can learn from Joshua. This has been all over me this week. I have been thinking about this for weeks. I love it when other people preach. It helps me a lot when they do. I know it helps you as well. Gives you a break from whatever this is. But this might take a couple of weeks. We didn't know, none of us knew when Eric stood up, but it was just right to worship like you did today. It was just right, wasn't it? So we may spend a couple of weeks here on this, and before our youth do the service on the 19th. I'm going to throw this announcement in. This is free. It doesn't cost any part of my message. In other words, I'll keep preaching longer because I've made it. But would you come help her? That would be great. Now, I hope you'll give me the liberty to do this today as you turn to Joshua chapter 2 in your Bible, your copy of the Scriptures. I want to do a little bit of running commentary that I think is exegetically justified, but it's certainly not in your text, all right? Some of what I'm going to say. So once in a while, if I stop and parenthetically insert something, when you give me the grace and liberty to do that, please don't throw anything. Now, starting in verse 1, it says, Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. And we talk about the fact that God didn't just dispossess the enemies that were in the land. And that it wasn't just militarily that they had to walk in. Listen, what kept them from just walking in saying, hey, God's with us, you're out? Right? No, they sent in 2 spies. They were operating a covert military operation. They were sending in some of their special forces. They were strategic. They were careful. They were well planned. They were going to execute correctly. They had already blown the opportunity, and a whole generation had to die off the first time they did this. They weren't, by the way, going to send in 10 again and take them out. Joshua knew what God had said. We're going to go possess this land now. But look what happens. Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. Let me say this. I can remember when I was in Africa that the big thing among the Maasai tribe was we were trying to minister to those people, and God did such a miraculous work that 10 churches were planted during that week period. But when we were in every village, we were looking for a man or woman, but usually a man. We tried to find a man if at all possible, because in their culture that was vital, to find a man of peace, they called him. Hopefully the oldest man we can find, because the older you are, the more respected you are in Maasai culture. And we were looking for in every village who will be someone, whether or not he'll respond and receive and accept and embrace the Lord Jesus, or whether or not he'll just say, okay, you have my approval to speak this message. We need to find the old man in the city, in the village, and catch his ear. Find a man of peace. Apparently, by the way, you can read through the story. You don't have to read much between the lines to understand. Here's this woman who's a harlot. By the way, probably not terribly thought of in her society. Not poorly thought of, like you would think. Hal pointed out this morning she may very well have been a temple prostitute. And that's not just a way to dress it up better. These people were pagan. But this, as much as they knew how, as best they were able, was their attempt to somehow connect to the otherworldliness of someone they didn't understand and connect with and didn't have a message from. And here's this prostitute, Rahab, and they find this woman of peace who's not only going to shelter them and hide them and lie for them, but she's going to give them the lowdown and help them understand the lay of the land so they can hear the voice of God and do what he tells them to do and take this city. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab. Now, why did he send it to Rahab? Because somebody had already seen what was going on with Rahab. I'm pretty sure I saw those guys at her place. And he said, quote, bring out the men who came to you and entered your house because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. She said, well, yeah, they came to me, but I didn't know where they'd come from. It's like all the men come to me. I'm a prostitute. But the woman had taken them and hidden them. She said, yeah, they came here. But at dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. Maybe you'll catch them. That's what she said. But in reality, verse 6 parenthetically tells you she'd taken them up to the roof and she'd hidden them under the stalks of flax that she laid out on top of her roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Isn't that great? So that's quite a story, and it's true. This is how it happened. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up to the roof and said to them, by the way, notice this. They didn't bunk with her. They weren't looking for a dual duty from this person. You get what I'm saying? Most of the people who would have come to try to take this city would have. The rest of the pagan kings, the Jebusites, the Hittites, if they decided, hey, we're going to go possess more land, and they found favor with this harlot, would have treated her like the harlot that she was, but not the men of God. She goes up to them, staying separately on the roof, not an inconsequential detail. And she says, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We've heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. Your reputation has preceded you. And what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please, swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family. The Lord I do not know, I do not understand, but that you are obviously representatives of. Swear to me by him. Because obviously he's the God who is. And the gods we serve and labor for and are delusionally believing in, they can't do anything compared to yours. She said, do that because I've shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. And the men said, our lives for your lives. If you don't tell what we are doing, we'll treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. She said to them, by the way, that house was, of course, destroyed, right? We know the rest, like Paul Harvey used to say. of the story. She said to them, "Go to the hills so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." Now the men had said to her, "This oath you made us swear will not be binding on us unless when we enter the land you've tied this cord." What color was the cord? Scarlet blood cord. "In the window through which you let us down, unless you have brought your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family into your house. If any of them go outside your house into the street, their blood will be on their own heads. We will not be responsible. As for those who are in the house with you, their blood will be on our head. So that if a hand is laid on them, we'll take care of them. But if you tell what we are doing, we'll be released from the oath you made us swear." "Agreed," she replied. "Let it be as you say." So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days. Another number that's not inconsequential in Scripture, that certainly could be a type of the 3 days Jesus was in the grave. Until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the 2 men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, came to Joshua son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands." Do those words sound familiar? Do you remember when the spies returned the first time from the promised land? And Joshua and Caleb were the men that said, "Oh yeah, we've got this. God's given it to us." And everybody else said, "Man, those people are huge. Have you done what? Moses, you have lost your mind. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. They have clumps of grapes they carry on big sticks between the shoulders of 2 men. Surely it is a land, like God said, flowing with milk and honey, but we can't take those people. We're like grasshoppers." These men, see, it really matters a lot of times who you send. They might have gone in the first time had Joshua and Caleb been the only two. They sent in too many, but this time, sometimes a small number is just the right number. Isn't it great to be if this is what we are, we might as well believe it's great, amen, because we are this for now, a very small church with a very big heart. And it's just the right number. Now, it'll be just the right number if a year from now we have 400 too, and feel free to go get them. Right? They said, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." Wow, we can stop right there, and it looks like that's just as much time as I got. And we might, but I'll just say a couple of things. Let me ask you a question first. Can you think, and there is no right answer, but the one I wrote down is the one that you should say. What do you think the one thing from the last millennium that changed history the most would be? From the last millennium up to the year 2000, the one thing, was it the Salk vaccination, or even in more recent times, the collapse of the Soviet Union, maybe? Here's what I decided, and I could be wrong. A lot of scholars agree with me, and you should too, but historians and academics and a lot of those people concur, it was probably the invention of the Gutenberg press. The Gutenberg press.
Correct.
Glenn agrees, and he is an historian. It literally changed everything, right? Because all the information and knowledge that man could put together, everything we could think of, everything that we knew collectively could be printed and disseminated among all, and we could all benefit from it and grow in knowledge together. And that change made all the difference. It made the industrial age possible. It made this new information age that we're living in possible. In fact, it made it where, ironically, we hardly use the printed word anymore. We just look, well, it's printed, but not on paper. We look at our phones or Kindles or our tablets or iPads or pods or computer screens. But all of that because those people that made all that stuff gained their knowledge from the fact that somebody was able to print it, put it in textbooks, and they were able to internalize it, except for Bill Gates. Drives you nuts, he didn't even go to college. Not everybody has to. Because we're not all cut from the same mold. Listen, those kinds of change, sea change, those big events, that's what the book of Joshua is full of. These are the monumental, these are the specific strategic moments in the life of the people of God where they've got a choice to make, and they're either going to go forward with transition and change, or listen, what they could have said even after that report came, they didn't have to say to Joshua like they did in chapter 1, Joshua, we're bone of your bone, we're flesh of your flesh. You say jump, we'll say how high. Basically, that's what they said. Just as you were with Moses, just as God was with Moses, He's with you. And just as we obeyed Moses. What a laugh. They really did know, didn't they? But they said that. Just as you obeyed Moses, we'll obey you. And now they mean it. And it made all the difference. I want you to know, we're going to talk about this more next week, but this is important. Every transition you decide you're going to make, first of all, you've got to dispossess some enemies to that transition in your life if you're going to possess the land God has for you. That's right. And every transition you decide you're going to make, look at that, it's working this week. Maybe not. Get forward for me up there. Is anyone up there? Wow. What's going on? Well, praise the Lord. Every transition you make is going to be tested with trouble. Every transition is going to be tested with trouble. It's not going to work. That's okay. You know what? This is a transition we're trying to make, so naturally it's tested with trouble. You've got to decide. You've got a choice to make. Listen, if you only want it, if it's easy, you'll never have it. If you only want it, if God will do it for you instead of with you and through you, you'll never have it. If you only want it, whatever it is, because of what everyone else is going to think, their adulation, applause, enjoyment will not be enough to sustain you through the trouble of getting it. But every transition you decide to make comes with the test of trouble if it's worth making. If God put it on your heart to do it. Some of that's because He's going to make sure you have the medal, because if you don't get through this, if you can't make it, listen, it took 40 years in the wilderness to get Egypt out of the people before they were ready to invest in and inheriting the eventual final promise of God, which was to possess Palestine as God's people. It took 40 years of wandering and refining and purifying and working. Some of us, we just say, well, Lord, I got saved yesterday. What's the deal? You're so slow. Don't wait on Him. He's waiting on you. We'll talk more about this next week. We'll even make a PowerPoint word, God willing. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? Bow your heads, close your eyes. God, I thank you